Whoopi Goldberg built a life on a voice America could never ignore. But long before that voice shook Hollywood, a little girl in New York was being taught to doubt the way her own mind worked. In classrooms that mistook dyslexia for failure. And in a home where poverty left her mother carrying more than one woman should have had to bear, Whoopi learned early that being heard could feel almost impossible. Years later, that same girl would become the Oscar-winning force of Ghost, the wounded spirit of The Color Purple, the joy at the heart of Sister Act, one of the rare EJOT winners, and the fearless presence at The View, where a single sentence could ignite a national storm. Yet, the deepest silence in her story did not come from criticism, controversy, or broken love. It came in 2019 when pneumonia and sepsis left one of America's strongest voices fighting for breath. Now at 70, one haunting question remains. What does a woman built on voice carry when life nearly takes the breath behind it? Before we begin, honor Whoopi Goldberg with a like. A quiet tribute to the woman who turned shame into sound, pain into courage, and silence into a voice the world could no longer ignore. Abandonment entered Whoopi Goldberg's life before she was old enough to understand the word. Born Karen Elaine Johnson on November 13, 1955. She grew up beside her brother Clyde in Manhattan's Chelsea Elliott Public Housing, where their mother, Emma, carried almost every burden after the children's father left. Emma worked as both a nurse and a teacher, pushing herself through exhausting days so her children would not have to feel how close their lives always were to falling apart. Their small apartment survived not on comfort, but on sacrifice. Every paycheck disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Bills gathered on the table. Shoes were worn until the soles split and the fabric began to tear. Some evenings, exhaustion reached home before Emma did. There was no father's voice waiting in the next room. No second pair of hands when fear or hardship entered the apartment. Watching her mother shoulder an entire family alone, Whoopi learned long before adulthood that security could vanish overnight. But quiet determination could keep a family standing one more day. It was the first lesson resilience ever taught her, and it would not be the last. Humiliation followed her into school. Words refused to settle properly on the page. Instructions became tangled, and adults mistook a different way of learning for a lack of intelligence. No one identified dyslexia. Instead, Whoopi was made to feel slow, lazy, and incapable. Red marks covered schoolwork that could never measure the alert, observant mind behind it. She later remembered, knowing she was not stupid, because her mother had always insisted otherwise. But classrooms continued teaching her a cruel lesson. Failure could be assigned to a child before anyone bothered to understand her. She eventually left school without graduating, carrying shame that never truly belonged to her. Yet the mind teachers could not read was already gathering voices, expressions, gestures, and human contradictions. She could remember how people spoke, notice what others overlooked, and turn observation into character. The girl who struggled to make sense of printed words was quietly developing the ability to walk onto a stage and make an audience recognize itself. At 14, facing an unplanned pregnancy and believing there was no safe adult or medical path available, Whoopi followed dangerous advice, and the consequences nearly broke her young body, an experience she would later discuss publicly in The Choices We Made. A year later, while still only 15, she faced another unplanned pregnancy. By then, changes in New York law allowed her to receive safe legal medical care. The difference between those two moments remained profound. One was shaped by secrecy and fear, the other by access to help. That contrast would later inform her willingness to speak openly about women's health and the dangers of leaving frightened young people without compassionate support. Poverty, an absent father, a mother temporarily taken from her by illness, dyslexia mistaken for failure, and adult decisions forced upon a teenager could have reduced her life to a catalog of wounds. Instead, those experiences became the hidden echoes beneath the voice America would one day know. Years later, when the stage lights rose and an audience waited, they were not simply hearing an actress or comedian. They were hearing the child who had once stood in doorways, classrooms, and moments of private fear, wondering whether anyone truly saw her. And when Whoopi Goldberg finally stepped into the light, the silence that had followed her since childhood no longer belonged to shame. It belonged to the audience, holding its breath, waiting for her next word. Shame followed Whoopi Goldberg out of school and into a life that offered no shelter. She left as a teenager without a diploma, carrying years of untreated dyslexia and the belief that she had already failed. Dangerous dependency soon promised a false kind of light, pulling her towards substances that seemed to quiet the echo of her own despair, only to leave the collapse afterward even darker and more merciless. For a brief moment, escape could feel like freedom. Then the pain returned heavier, proving that what looks like a friend in the dark can become another room without a door. Recovery came in fragments. Help from a counselor she later married, difficult restarts, and the slow recognition that she could no longer surrender control of her life. Yet the deepest reason to rise was sleeping beside her. As a young mother, Whoopi could no longer measure survival only by whether she reached the next morning. A child was watching her, trusting her, needing food, steadiness, and a future. That private pressure cut deeper than public shame ever could. The mind Whoopi had tried to silence was also the only gift capable of carrying both mother and daughter beyond poverty. Every attempt to return to herself therefore became an act of love. Imperfect and exhausted, but chosen again. California did not greet them with rescue. It gave Whoopi work. She waited tables in San Diego, laid bricks until labor lived in her hands, handled money as a bank teller, and applied cosmetics in a mortuary, preparing quiet faces while wondering how to keep her own household moving. She taught acting and comedy in Berkeley's experimental rooms with a young Courtney Love among her students and held on to performance because it turned fear into rent, food, and one more week of possibility. Her daughter remained at the center of that struggle. Each shift meant absence. Each paycheck meant protection. Then in 1978, Whoopi witnessed two planes collide over San Diego. The image stayed with her so completely that flying became impossible for 13 years. Roads replaced the sky. A customized bus carried her from city to city, allowing talent to advance while terror kept her close to the ground. The bus became both shelter and limit. A moving home for a woman chasing opportunity without abandoning the child whose trust had helped pull her back toward life. A life-changing job eventually demanded a journey no highway could complete. A check was offered, and with it came the choice between remaining inside fear or crossing it. In the days before the flight, Whoopi sweated, fought the urge to retreat, and boarded a private plane with no illusion that courage would feel graceful. She avoided looking around, endured the movement of the aircraft, and discovered that fear could stay powerful without making every decision for her. That flight did not erase 13 years of panic. It proved she could move while panic traveled beside her. The same truth had carried her through dependency, exhausting work, and young motherhood. Progress often arrived without applause, while a child waited at home, and the future remained uncertain. By the time audiences began to recognize Whoopi Goldberg, they saw the wit, the characters, and the commanding voice. They could not see the young mother behind them, counting wages, riding long highways, and rebuilding a life one frightened decision at a time. That hidden labor became the foundation of her art. She learned to give pain a face, fear a voice, and survival a rhythm. The road ahead would lead to stages the world would remember, but its first audience had been one little girl, and its first triumph was a mother choosing again and again to come back. Pain found Whoopi Goldberg's voice before Hollywood knew how to honor it. In 1982, after years of rebuilding dignity in workshops, clubs, and rooms that offered no promise of a future, she made her first screen appearance in Citizen. "I'm not losing my mind, I'm giving it away." It was not a grand entrance, but it opened a crack in the wall. A year later, her one-woman show revealed what had been forming inside her all along. A performer who could turn wounds into characters. Silence into timing and survival into language. She moved between voices with humor, pain, and startling humanity, making audiences laugh before they realized how close they were to tears. Broadway soon followed, and across 156 sold-out performances, Whoopi went from downtown outsider to a name New York could no longer ignore. But triumph came with a private cost. Night after night, the same griefs, jokes, accents, bodies, and silences had to pass through her again. Behind the curtain, applause could not protect her throat, her nerves, or the exhaustion waiting in the dressing room mirror. Then the color purple placed her pain before America. In 1985, Steven Spielberg cast her as Celie, the bruised but unbroken woman at the heart of Alice Walker's story. Whoopi did not simply play the role. She seemed to understand it from places no acting class could reach. Celia's lowered eyes, delayed voice, and slow rise towards selfhood carried the weight of every person who had ever been made to feel poor, strange, unwanted, or unseen. The film earned 11 Academy Award nominations, and Whoopi received a Best Actress nomination, suddenly standing inside the very Hollywood that once had no clear place for her. But recognition did not erase doubt. Success can lift a woman high while quietly demanding that she prove she deserves the height. In 1990, Ghost changed everything again. As Oda Mae Brown, she made comedy feel human and grief feel reachable, winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress and becoming only the second Black woman to win an acting Oscar. Yet even victory had its silence. The statue could shine. The world could cheer. And still, after the cameras dimmed, she had to carry herself back into the quiet place. Fame could not fill. Momentum kept asking for more. In 1992, Sister Act turned Whoopi into a global symbol of joy, with Dolores Vancartier bringing music, comedy, and warmth to families around the world. The film passed $200 million worldwide and made her beloved across generations. But joy can be labor too. After the songs, the jokes, and the applause, there were nights when the room went quiet, her throat felt raw, and Karen, the woman beneath the name Whoopi, had to wonder how much of herself could keep being turned into performance. In 1994, she stood on the Oscar stage as the first Black woman to host the ceremony solo, carrying not only jokes and timing, but the weight of being watched as proof of what others might one day be allowed to do. Every pause mattered, every gesture could be judged. Then came more turns. Karina, The Little Rascals, Hollywood Squares, The View for Colored Girls, and the voice work of Toy Story 3. From the outside, the career looked limitless. Inside, it were flights, criticism, reinvention, long days, and the pressure to remain useful in an industry quick to push women aside. That is the deeper truth of Whoopi Goldberg's rise. Greatness did not arrive as a gift wrapped in light. It came through repetition, fatigue, loneliness, and the stubborn refusal to disappear.